So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is part two of our podcast with our good friend, award-winning writer and soon-to-be author Nathan DeLong, talking about the Brunswick Independent Authors Association and kind of a preview on his new book on the history of the Shiretown, Woodstock, New Brunswick. Good morning, Nathan.
Good morning, Jeffrey. It's great to be here.
Nathan, we talked in the previous podcast about your background, kind of a resume, presentation of the great work you've done for different papers and university-wise. So the inspiration for this book, you've been a great fan of Woodstock history. When did you get the seed in your mind to do a book on the history of Woodstock, and what will the book be called? That's always good to mention. So,
Well, the title of the book is Woodstock, New Brunswick's oldest town through the years.
and the seed of doing a book on the history of Woodstock. You had mentioned for years you were kind of fascinated by the history of our region of Carleton County. Do you remember the time when something snapped and said, hey, maybe it's time for someone to write a full history on Woodstock?
Oh, yeah, it's funny you asked that. I could go on forever about that. I mean, I first took an interest when I was a kid, and I'm actually dedicating the book to my paternal grandparents they're my grandparents on dad's side. Because my grandmother DeLong, when she was still alive, she passed away in 2007, but when she was still alive, she'd often, tell stories of the way the area was growing up and, the way she remembered it and that type of thing. My grandfather was much the same way. After she passed away, especially, I suddenly took a greater interest in the area, and, my grandfather and I would look through scrapbooks and historical calendars that are published every year. At the time, it was through the Unit 95 Annavets and the Carleton County Historical Society, and I think the Annavets still publish those calendars yearly.
Yep.
But we'd get looking at those calendars, and this was around 2007 or so, 2008 maybe. I was in grade 7 at the old Woodstock Middle School, and my interest that I had taken as a kid in my grandfather's collections of photos, newspaper clippings, historical calendars got me interested in doing a Heritage Fair project that year on the town of Woodstock, because it is the oldest currently incorporated town in New Brunswick, the oldest active, longest standing, I guess you could call it.
Because Moncton was incorporated before, but it eventually became a city.
Yeah, and that's something that's really interesting. That's a bit of a misconception that's been, I guess, going around for a few years, and I mean it may just have been an honest oversight when the town leaders at the time decided to go with that for a slogan, but I understand from doing research that Moncton actually incorporated as a town twice. The first time was about a year and a month before Woodstock passed their incorporation, and Moncton later incorporated as a city, and that's how we know it today, and that was in probably the late 1800s. But I guess back to the inspiration for this, I decided after I did that Heritage Fair project and presented to the class and got a really good grade on it that I would continue my research and take that to another level. So as I kept researching, looking at books that had previously been written on the area and different aspects of the area, I eventually got thinking, wouldn't it be great if I could write a book on this, Because as I got doing research, one thing I noticed was that a lot of what has been written about Woodstock and how the area came to be and some of the other, intricacies of the area, it was done several decades, even in some cases like a century and a half ago, or, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been a really long time. So a lot of those volumes, I mean, some of them have been republished, but a lot of them are long out of print. For an area that claims to pride itself so much, or says it prides itself so much on its heritage, why hasn't there been a book written on it? Why isn't there a recent volume of it that sums up the vast majority of it, or takes an in-depth look at the vast majority of it? Why isn't that available? There's all kinds of communities that, have rich histories, but maybe not, quite as interesting as ours. I know I'm a little biased on that, but all kinds of communities, throughout the region and throughout the province even, that have had recent versions of their history written and published that have been in-depth books. Why not Woodstock? That's a big part of it. I mean, there's just so many stories that are rarely discussed and that I don't even remember being taught in school that are just really interesting stories, and they're either going to be lost if they're not told soon,
Yeah.
or they're just not going to be understood, or they're cases where history could repeat itself. If you don't learn from the past, it'll definitely repeat itself, usually is what I'm told. So that's sort of the inspiration, if you will, for why I got so gung-ho, if you will, on writing this book.
So, from my personal perspective, being a reporter here in Woodstock for the Bugle for a number of years, Nathan can back me up. There's so many topics you can cover. It is a kind of a border town. Your Holton's close by and different small communities. Woodstock is not a one industry town, or not anymore. You got the recreational service like Connell Park and harness racing. You got the political history. You got the different social history, sporting history, entertainment. We're in the midst right now of a boom of immigrants coming in, working for McCain's and Jolly Farmer and stuff. So the breakdown of the community is changing quite a bit. Now the book on Woodstock goes back to is going to go back to 17.
It's going back to at least 1717. I have references from earlier than that are areas I mentioned in passing. But I'm going as far back as the rarely discussed and somewhat rarely understood indigenous village at Fort Maductic, in the present area of Hay Settlement. It was located actually right across from the current entrance to the Maliseet Trail hiking path. And another area I'll be talking about in my book from that era is the Maliseet Trail portage route that was used by the Maliseet indigenous people that lived at Fort Maductic, and that route cut over to the Eel River and followed a lot of the lakes near Canterbury and further west of there toward the U.S. border and down into Maine. It went almost as far down as Bangor at one time. So I'm taking a look at that. I'm taking a look at just how prominent that area was as a First Nations village at one time prior to the current Woodstock First Nation being established in the mid-1800s. I'm looking at the fact that George Washington actually sent representatives up that portage route to recruit Maliseets from that area to help fight against the possible British invasion. And there were some that actually helped fend off the British during the Revolutionary War in the U.S. when they broke off from the British control as a British, 13 colonies it was called then, I guess.
Yeah.
But when they broke off from that, there were indigenous people from Fort Maductic who fought a battle against the British at Machias, Maine. I'm even mentioning the story of John Giles, who was captured by the Maliseets from Fort Maductic during a raid of the state of Maine. Now, this is an area, like I say, has been written about before, but a long time ago, and is rarely talked about, although a lot of the elders at Woodstock First Nation understand and are familiar with it and have ancestors who were buried at the site of Fort Maductic, where the ancient burial ground was located and is now under the Mactaquac Dam head pond. But it's rare; it's not really discussed that often, and it doesn't seem to be understood by a lot of people. So it's a story that kind of has to be told, and I've got a whole in-depth section on that.
It's almost like it should be multiple volumes because there's a lot going on. You can't not underwrite something about Woodstock's history because, as Nathan can tell, there's a lot of it. That's the only second time I've heard about the Revolutionary War connection.
Yeah, and I mean, another connection to that is that a lot of loyalists from the Revolutionary War, who may or may not have actually seen combat, but were supporters of the British cause for various reasons. Like, a lot of those people settled this region immediately following the Revolutionary War. Mind you, as far as the indigenous perspective goes, at the risk of sounding too controversial, I mean, it is coming from a contemporary white Anglophone Protestant man perspective. But by all means, I encourage everyone who has an understanding of this to write about it, because, as I said, there's all kinds of these stories that'll be lost. The way I'm writing this too is that, like, I'm trying not to get too into my own opinion, if you will, when I piece this together. Yeah. And I mean, and I acknowledge that I'm coming from a contemporary, 21st century bias. However, I'll state a lot of what took place and, try to sum up maybe how it's affected, the way things have shaped up nowadays.
Now, from what I've seen about Nathan's love of this and his research, is going to cover a lot of avenues. And now the timetable of this book release, what Nathan's been doing in the days he takes off from the Miramichi Leader. He was a reporter there. We talked in previous podcasts. Great work he's done. Any timetable on this publishing? Are we looking at 2020, 2021?
Possibly later this year or early next year. This is something that I've been chipping away at as far as research goes since I was in high school.
Yeah.
I graduated from Woodstock High in 2013. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree with a double major in journalism and communications and policy from St. Thomas University in Fredericton that I obtained in 2017 after 4 years there, and some experience at the campus papers that I discussed in a previous podcast. I've been chipping away, though. I've been working, I guess, aggressively. I don't know if I'd use that term, but I've been pretty focused on, just chipping away at this and doing as much as I can in my downtime since the summer of 2017. That's when I've really started writing this and, researching Fort Meductic and researching the Loyalist settlement and other aspects of the town's history.
But chipping away is a good analogy because, when somebody does a sculpture, you kind of envision what when you sculpt a rock, what it's going to look like. And chipping away actually is a good term because you're basically taking what you think should be kept and what should be taken out. Because any guest lecturer on a community history can tell you, every page you put on in that book, there could be 10 to 15 hours of research, because sometimes in journalism and most times you need a second or third source. And what Nathan has told me, which is part of research, to get enough of a clear picture what the main story would be, and then add on like the little tweaks and the dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Like, for example, if you're doing something about Woodstock, a lot of great sporting tradition of Woodstock, the athletes and the different performers, entertainment as well. The business owners here, there's such a tradition. But the idea when I agree with Nathan, from the 1700s to that 1880 period, where publications were becoming more prominent, where it's easier to research, leading up to the Benny Swim years, the famous case. Like I said, you gotta go in depth to find what you need to find, because there is no textbooks out there just on Woodstock.
That's another area where I guess I got an inspiration to do a volume that was all encompassing. Was a lot of my time researching has been spent at the L.P. Fisher Public Library archives in Woodstock, and that's an interesting part of the town's history too, because the nucleus of that collection and the foundation of that collection was started by Reverend W.O. Raymond, who I believe was a priest in this area, or clergyman, who documented a lot of what he saw when the area was coming together and being settled. And for some time after that, he's written about the St. John River, about Carleton County as a whole, about the Woodstock area. But he was the one who, I guess, was the one who started that collection. The library got a hold of it after he passed away, and it's just been growing basically ever since. And Greg Campbell there is a solid archivist. I'm going to put a shameless plug in for him because he's a phenomenal guy.
I do plugs all the time.
He's a phenomenal guy, and knows a lot about the history as well. But there was one day I was in high school. I went into the library to attempt to do some research, and I stopped by the Raymond Room, which is where the archive collection is located, on the bottom floor in the original section. The library's since been expanded and revamped, but this was long before the ground had even been broken for the expansion in 2013. But I went into the library one day when I was in high school and wanted to do some research. I stopped by the Raymond Room, poked my head in the door, and Greg was in there just working away, and I said, "Do you have any books on the history of Woodstock? Like, that sum it up as a whole?" And he said, "You got to be more specific. You got to narrow that down." And it's stuck with me since then. So that's, I guess, a bit further of a reminder that this needs to be done. These are stories that need to be told.
See, what's weird about Woodstock, and this is my own observation as somebody coming from the North Shore who first came to Woodstock in '84 for college, my journalism degree. Woodstock is a very, very unique community in New Brunswick, because some days it feels like the States, some days it feels like Nova Scotia, sometimes it feels like a Sussex or another English community. It's a very unique personality because side streets in Woodstock have their own personality. Downtown core has its own personality. Connell Road, what they call the Golden Mile, has its own personality. The churches have a personality. There's antique buildings throughout there, the former courthouse, former schoolhouse. There's a lot of aspects, and that makes it like St. John. So certain days there's a different feeling every day, and the people are very unique because there's all different types of backgrounds, even with the English speakers here, and I find that enriches Woodstock to an extent. You can't say, well, this Woodstock is only one way. There's a lot going on in Woodstock from a historical standpoint and its impact on the current population.
Absolutely, and I mean we have a few notable early people who I'll be mentioning in my book. Everyone from a horticulturist who lived in the Woodstock area and like found through extensive research and experimentation and trials that we could grow apples in this climate,
and became now we're a big apple production area.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Francis Peabody Sharp was sort of the forefather of that, if you will.
The Johnny Appleseed of Woodstock.
Exactly. That's a whole other story. You'll have to read the book to find out.
Yeah,
about
we don't want you to not read the book. So it is, like I said, these are previews.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're talking, like I said, 2 or 3 volumes could be a possibility. Like I said, it's still in process. Now we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but I want to ask you 2 very specific questions, which a lot of people have asked me to ask you. Actually, I've been talking around. Will you have people helping with the book besides yourself, of course?
I've had a few folks who have shared information and submitted photos and suggested places where I could look for additional information and research.
So you're not going to have an assistant. It'll just be you, probably.
I'm the only author on record. I did have a couple folks who submitted recollections. A couple of them are from family members. Even I'll share that point just so it's out there, and I'll state it for the record. But Paul Hansen, who's been around for a long time and has a lot of recollections and memories of the area and insight into a lot of different topics. He actually, when I was still working at the Bugle-Observer in 2017, brought me in a sheet that he had typed out of various recollections from when he used to deliver bread for a living around the region. I mean, he went everywhere from Canterbury, where we're at now at Jeffrey's home office, to northern Carleton County and whatnot. So I mean, if he didn't come that far, he certainly came close. So he brought me in recollections of that and a few other intricacies of the area. But I'm the only author on record. I'll be mentioning, though, for anybody who submits recollections or shares recollections, I'll be including their names, and a bit of their stories. But I'm the only author on record, though. I know it's a long answer to your question.
No, it's a perfect answer. But this is the second question. We talked a little bit about that. Actually, one of my media colleagues that Nathan doesn't know asked me straight out. He said he's an independent author. He said, yeah. Well, he said, is he self-publishing? What is he going to do? As it stands right now, are you going to self-publish? Or are you going to shop this to the major labels, as we say, or major publishing houses? As it stands right now, you're going to be self-published.
Yeah, I've explored a few options, but right now
Kindle, you said? Or?
Yeah, Kindle Direct Publishing, the Amazon service, is what I'm looking at the moment. I've explored a few options, but right now I think this is the one that's the best fit for me. I can prepare a book, have it edited, upload it for no money up front, and it's print on demand. So a good thing about that is that you don't have to order a few hundred books that you might not be able to sell right away.
Or you would own your book for 7 years, like what happened to our colleague Jim Shaw there. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing. Like you have a bit more autonomy over your own work when you self-publish as well.
Well, all I can say, ladies and gentlemen, if any people out there that want to a publishing company or whatever, and I do a jokey shout out. Jim and I mentioned in a previous podcast. I don't know if Nathan heard this. If Stephen King is listening, or like a big publisher is listening, you would not be against getting a big cash amount of money to have it published by a big book company. But the idea is to get it published, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I understand too that some large publisher, or actually most large publishers, are in it to make money. It's the whole idea of being in business. I'm a big supporter of free market capitalism, that type of thing. So, I mean, if a big publisher approached me with an idea and offered a sum of money to research and publish that idea, I mean, I would probably take them up. But right now my idea is to get it published. So I mean, I get if they have an idea in mind that they would want me to write about, that it would be something that would make them money. I'm totally in favor of that, and I totally understand that. But right now this is my main goal, and I've got a few ideas for some other books that you might be hearing about in the future. But I kind of have to wrap up one project at a time. So my focus is on wrapping this one up before I delve too far into anymore.
Our colleague Wendy Koenig, our great writer from Drummond, always says, you got 7 books on the go. But I know one thing, and this is a problem for any writer from New Brunswick. The province of New Brunswick itself has less than 800,000 people, which, if you look at Boston, you look at parts of Massachusetts, New York State, it's minuscule compared to, like, Metro Toronto, 6 million people. If you did a book about Toronto Filipino restaurants, you could probably get a publisher for that. Like, it's the smaller a region is, but what I like about Nathan's writing style, like a lot of authors, descriptive is describes his work, and I'm looking forward. I'm going to be probably the first person or one of the first people that's going to read the book and say, "Hey, man, you did well." But the idea about this Facebook, Nathan DeLong book, myself, J.J. Carrier, New Brunswick Independent Authors, we're giving you this podcast this morning to give one person's perspective as to what drives him to doing books and stuff like that. Now, as we wrap up, Nathan, to the people that are inspired by this podcast, I hope there's a few, of maybe looking at their own home region or looking at doing what you do, what would be the best piece of advice for them if you want to take up the mantle of nonfiction author?
Stick with it. I mean, this seems kind of cheesy, I know, but at the same time, I mean, it's easy to get discouraged when you're trying to do, for example, a nonfiction piece. I was never really much of a fiction fan. I've always been more, nonfiction, stories about the community, local area, local region, that type of thing. But to do that and to put together something that covers as much history as I'm looking to cover in my book, it takes a ton of research. My works cited page is at least 6 to 7 pages right now in my draft in Google Drive that I'm piecing together in Microsoft Word and doing some layout there off and on as we speak. We're speaking now we're chatting on Friday the 14th of June.
Yep.
I just rewrote a few sections last night. It'll take some time to get it exactly how you want it or exactly as it should read for people to be able to read it and understand it and maybe even be able to relate to it. So don't give up, basically. I'm in a situation where I'm a young man who's 2 years out of university, and I work what feels like a full-time job and a half sometimes, as much as I love it.
That's true. Yeah.
So I don't always have time to devote to the book and the book alone. I'm active in my church in Miramichi, and I work quite a bit too, and cover a lot of events at irregular hours. So I mean, just stick with it and take your time. I mean. Yeah. That's sort of my advice, really, to anybody that's looking.
Actually, let's
do
mention
this.
Your church, because I think your church community is a good benefit. If we mention your church, I like to.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm more than happy to. I've been a born again Christian since November 2017, starting at Woodstock Baptist. Spent some time in the United Church growing up, but lost interest and spent a few years away from it. Get back into church and into the faith, if you will.
And you said the name of the church is that you're with right now?
Well, Miramichi, I'm an active member of the Point Church,
which has expansion in Bathurst. You said,
yeah, they've got a home base there in Newcastle, and they have a satellite site in Chatham as well as a satellite site in Bathurst. Newcastle and Chatham, for those that aren't familiar with the Miramichi area, were 2 former standalone towns that joined together with several other villages and smaller communities
in
to
a
form the city of
controversial
Miramichi
manner,
in 1995 with in an area that was in a manner that was a bit controversial, which is a whole other story, and maybe even an idea for a book in the future. But
David Adams Richards, our senator and award-winning, he said actually around the time of the merger, he said there's got to be a science fiction movie here someplace.
Exactly.
10 years before, it would have been science fiction that Chatham and Newcastle, big rivalry, Miramichi Valley and James M. Hill. Oh my God, covered that for years.
That rivalry still exists.
But like I said, that's like putting Dalhousie and Camden together, oil and water.
One of my contacts who's in senior baseball up there, like I mentioned in a previous podcast, I've been covering extensively for this will be my second summer doing that, so a year and a half. He's definitely still of the Newcastle Chatham rivalry mindset, and there's a few others in that area. I mean, it's become a running joke for a lot of people who didn't experience it the way a lot of others did in the 90s and 80s and prior to that. But my church in Miramichi, like I say, it's called The Point Church. Kevin Matthews is the lead pastor, former Shiretown Bible Camp director in the 1990s there in Bristol. Some of you may be familiar with him, and he preached under Laurel Buckingham, another Carleton County boy, at Moncton Westland for a few years before he took over what was then called Newcastle United Baptist, and has grown the church so that it serves between the online congregation and CD ministry, and the 3 sites serves a few hundred people a week, actually between I think 600 and 700 he mentioned last week at the business meeting.
It'd be interesting, we're going to wrap up on this, but it'd be interesting in a few years, once the book is published, you'll be a guest lecturer on not only Woodstock, but Carleton County history. Because, a lot of people write books, and a little shout out to our co-member Doug Arch, Life of a Screw. Doug has told me he's giving lectures at universities in Frankton, where his books are sold and discussion is talked about. And that's what I hope for Nathan, great success in this, because if you don't recount your history, you forget it.
Exactly.
And, interesting. I want to talk about the religious aspect of Nathan, because the Bible Belt aspect of Woodstock is very important as well. There's been a lot of great churches, a lot of great church members who have, and like the war years too as well. Not only that, Vietnam as well, in Korea, World War I, World War II. That's another thing. You mentioned the Anavets and the Legion of Woodstock, some great representation.
Yeah, this area has made major contributions actually to the 2 world wars, as well as several other conflicts and war efforts over the years.
So, like I said, the book, that's the best preview you can get, because when you start writing about Woodstock, it could be 10,000 pages before you're done. So.
Oh, we could do several hours worth of podcasts on this, but to spare from boring you, we'll probably wrap up this one soon. But I'd be more than happy to chat about it for anybody that's interested in more information. Feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or Twitter or email or whatever works for you, really, or even give me a call if you have my number.
Yeah. Nathan DeLong book on Facebook. Check out his work in the Miramichi Leader if you're a TJ follower, the TJ News site. New Brunswick Independent Authors Association, which as we speak, we've, besides Nathan, we've added a few more authors. We're going to be profiling them a little bit on the site. I apologize that the site is closed for now, but we're trying to keep it concentrated on the people that we're going to build up our foundation. We're going to have different announcements over the next few weeks, few days and weeks. Now, the JJ Governor channel, again, give a like, a subscribe, a comment. All comments are appreciated. But if you have something bad to say or negative, that's okay. But keep it calm. We're not talking politics here. Because if Nathan and I did a book on Woodstock politics, oh my God, you would never stop talking about it, because Core and Harold Culbert and the MPs and Richard Hatfield, and my God, there would be no end to it.
Yeah, and David Alward from this region and
mayor,
becoming premier later on. I mean, mayors who've come and gone.
Hugh John Fleming
from this region.
Art Slip, a little shout out to our friend Art. Anyway, this has been an interesting podcast morning. We're going to be doing kind of a third one very soon. But Nathan, before I say anything else, you know how proud I am of you. I'm very proud of doing this podcast, because this podcast wasn't even envisioned until about 6 months ago. And I said, when I do this channel, who's the first person I want to make sure to get down the road? It's you. I didn't want to tell you ahead, but it's been my honor, because when you interview Nathan or around Nathan, it's sort of like Christmas for a journalist, because we talk 4,000 topics at once. We're never even talking even about the Maple Leafs or the Habs or the Raptors or senior ball. When he mentions senior ball, like, he knows I'm a former senior ball player, because he picks my brain. Remember, you could even do something on the Bill Lee years about senior ball in the province. That could be a book right there.
Yeah, I've one idea I have for a book in the future that I need to flesh out a little more and develop a little more is a book on just the history of the Chatham Ironman Club. And
oh my God, that's
Miramichi. I mean, my contact Greg Morris is their general manager, who's coached that program for decades
and he
played at one time and used to be an all-around athlete. So
yeah, the old NB Senior League. My God, you had former World Series players and Bill Lee and like Darryl Thomas and players like that.
Just this year, we have with the St. John Alpines pitcher who was previously, as of last summer, a phone call away from a call up to the major leagues.
We don't want to give that away, because he could be still called. So.
Well, he could be, but he, I think, was released from the Blue Jays last summer.
So, ladies and gentlemen, again, enjoy the humid Friday morning. Canterbury, the black flies are out. It must be spring in Carleton, York County, because it's the way it goes. Anyway, keep your stick in the ice. And again, a little shout out to all the Toronto Raptors fans. Sometimes it takes 26 years to get to the top of the mountain, or 25 years. And congratulations, because you never know we're going to win again. And that's the first, Nathan can back me up, it's the first major league title for a Canadian squad since the Habs in '93. So it's been 26 years for Canada not only for NBA, Raptors, or whatever.
I'll just say it's about time a Toronto sports franchise did well.
Leafs are next.
I'm a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan. I've always liked the Leafs. I'm sick of being disappointed every year, though.
But put it this way, better chance now. But the Leafs are next.
Let's hope. Let's hope and pray. Let's hope and pray there's not another 52 years.
Put it this way, if anybody in Carleton County wants to do a Raptors parade for the kids, I think you should. That's my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah, have a good one. Bye.
Take care.